I don't think we need introductions now. We've done this a few times.
Yeah, I think so. So basically, we're going to be talking about the Firefox browser development tools, Chrome development tools, IE. Bob will be helping me out with that one because I don't use IE's developer tools very often. Then we'll move into the Twitter Bootstrap and what we use that for and why it's important, which leads us right into jQuery, which pretty much runs the DOM, the browser. So to get started, kind of wanted to cover over why we even need debugging tools in the browser when we've got Visual Studio, and why do we need libraries like Bootstrap for CSS and jQuery for JavaScript. A long time ago, I was a Cold Fusion developer, and back then we didn't have any libraries. If you needed to do something in the browser without it going back to the server, you had to write JavaScript to do it. And back then they also had VBScript, which would run in the browser, but nobody does that anymore. And it only ran in IE, which is one of the reasons why. The difference between VBScript mainly and JavaScript is that VBScript actually is a subset of VB, where JavaScript is not a subset of Java. It used to be called ActionScript, I believe, or LiveScript, I probably forget. But anyway, back then you had to write your own JavaScript, and accessing the DOM was different in the browsers. Netscape, so that far back, Mosaic, and IE. So you had to write your JavaScripts 3-4 different ways to do the exact same thing depending on which browser you were using. It was not very fun. JavaScript is a fairly difficult language to learn and get used to, especially when you have to write it in many different ways. It's like being able to speak English, except you have to speak it in different dialects that you don't really understand. If it's like here in the South, you can hear the difference, but you wouldn't understand it in JavaScript. So a lot of that went away when web forms came out. When Microsoft came out with web forms, if you were a .NET developer, you were pretty happy. You didn't have to do a lot of JavaScript, very, very rarely. Unfortunately, you didn't have so much control over the UI either, so there was no big push for. Matter of fact, we did everything in tables and table data and table rows. And, it was pretty easy to see what was going on. You could set the border on the table to 1 instead of 0, and you could see that all the table data were filling up all the rows correctly, and it was pretty easy to figure out what you're doing, and then you just turn it off, and everything looked okay because it was just a website. But then, the introduction to mobile came around with the iPad, and a lot's happened since then. And suddenly, resolution became very important, screen size, and tables don't scale very well. Scrolling side to side on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, really uncomfortable. I remember when I first got my Storm. Who made the Storms? It was the whole screen clicked. I couldn't even use it. It was from Verizon. It was a phone. It was the first big screen phone, and I remember going to Verizon's website because I was so excited to be able to surf the internet, and even their site wouldn't work on their phones. So it's been a few years now, and what has come to pass is what's called responsive design. And what that does basically is it picks up on the screen size via media queries and adjusts itself. You can even make things go away. If you have a big header with an image that looks great on a desktop, where you have a big screen and lots of resolution, but takes up almost the entire 4-thumb scroll on a phone just to smash it all in there, you can make it just disappear. So it's come a long ways, and several years ago they came out with this thing called MOOTools, My Object Oriented Tools. And it was a library built on top, it was a JavaScript library built on top of JavaScript and CSS to allow you to do really cool things with the UI. And that led into people figuring out you could do really cool things with the UI and make it easier to work with JavaScript, which led into the handlebars and then eventually Knockout, and now jQuery is the most popular. Well, React is catching up. But,
Angular.
Angular, yeah, Angular. People, and one of the reasons we use jQuery is, it's supported by big companies. Bootstrap, its real name is Twitter Bootstrap. It's supported by Twitter, invented it. Angular is Google, and React is Facebook. The Facebook team implemented React. So, they're up on CDNs. We don't have to use our own servers to download these, and if somebody's been to another website that has that version on a CDN, then when they come to your website and you're using the same version with the same CDN, it doesn't have to re-download again. So the internet becomes more entertaining, and also doesn't suck up all your data on your phones, because people have to pay for that still, like they used to have to pay for texting. But now that we do so much more in the browser, that we even have applications nowadays called SPAs, single page applications. It's not one page. It's basically one page loads, and then the browser runs that as like an application, like it would in Windows or OS X or Macintosh. So all of a sudden now you've got a programming environment in the browser, which kind of takes it away from server and away from Visual Studio, except Bob will show you a way to get around that with JavaScript. So getting good with your F12 developer tools in Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, you really need to only become proficient at one of them, as I found. So that's why Bob's helping me with IE, because I rarely use it, because I became proficient with Chrome and just kind of stayed with it. There is one thing, though, I'd like to show you with Firefox, though, in that Firefox has two things that are really, really cool. In that, so with Chrome, if I pick one of these, see, these are normally out like this. There's that one, and there's this one, okay? Because I'm remoted in right now, my resolution is crunched. It was actually Soma that brought this to my attention, because I'd never seen it crunched. When I work from home, I have pretty high bandwidth, and I have a giant monitor, so I had never noticed that this was happening. But Soma couldn't develop, because she couldn't get to the stuff behind this, because it was staying out and it was overlapping. Responsive design, the site was doing what it was supposed to do because it was on Bootstrap, but I hadn't built the side navs to respond to that. So what I was doing at home is I forgot about Firefox, because I don't use it that often, but I was dragging this in and letting it go. And as you can see, when you're remoted in, it doesn't transition. So I was trying to figure out where exactly these needed to start slamming in, when they started to come over top of this area here. And I forgot that with Firefox, that's really easy to do. In Chrome, when you F12, you have your elements, and you can say, okay, I want to look at it in like this. And that immediately just makes it the size of a phone really quick. So yeah, I knew by the time I got that small, I'd need to have scaled down. However, with Firefox, one of the cool things about Firefox is you have this responsive design mode, and hopefully I can get to enough of it here, but basically what that does is it gives you handles. It's really kind of tough on that. So you can just move stuff in so it really gives it a feel for the responsive design. You can see how this page is adjusting itself to fit as we get smaller and smaller. So that's pretty cool with Firefox. The thing I really like with Firefox is on this page they have this, what we can do is called a 3D view. And what that does is it enables me to turn.
It's pretty neat.
So sometimes you'll have stuff
styles. Now, we'll see in a few minutes when I'm working with Chrome that a lot of times you're trying to figure out where you are by clicking on something in the left-hand pane and seeing what styles show up or don't show up that you were expecting in the right. You start turning stuff off. You start writing style selectors in there to try and get the page to do what you want. And every once in a while, like out here, I'm going to use the mouse so people on the voting in can see. So we have this area that kind of just like flies way out here, and then what's this blue thing up under here? And so this might be exactly where it's supposed to be in Chrome and Firefox and Safari and Opera and IE 8, 9, 11, and Edge. But for some reason in 10, it's this image right here is flying way off to the left, and it's really hard to find in other browsers. And here you can see that, well, wait a minute, that shouldn't be flying way out there. So now, just by clicking on it, it'll tell you exactly what's going on there. So this is a little bit hard to see down here, but if I bring this up. So now you can see exactly what's affecting this and where that came from. We have this little blue thing. You click on it, and then it shows you, oh, that's the anchor. That's why that's sitting there like that. You can even take a look up underneath here. And when I first saw this, I'm like, well, what are these two white plates here? Why are they so short compared to the rest of the page, right? One of the browsers might completely freak out on that. But when I clicked on it, I realized the one closest to the upper layers is actually the body, which leads me to believe that this one is going to be the actual HTML, the root element in the DOM. So just knowing little stuff like that, can really make or break your 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out why something isn't working for your presentation to your boss tomorrow. So that's pretty much what I use Firefox for. I don't have to use it very often, but when I do, it usually solves something I would have taken maybe 45 minutes to a couple hours to figure out, down to just a few minutes. And that's pretty much it. All we're going to cover for Firefox. The main one, as I mentioned earlier, is Chrome. And we need to get, boy, it's so weird looking at Chrome. It's all messed up. Okay. So this is one of the applications we're working on right now. And this is actually the dashboard for the main application we're working on, which is this one here. So what we're going to cover now for a few minutes is Chrome development tools. The easiest way to launch it, there's 2 ways to launch it. F12, obviously, I mean, there's many ways to opt. The quickest way is F12. That brings up the developer tools. I like to have mine undocked, especially during presentations, because it's easier to show what's going on our whole page, and I can just drag it down and show things, what's going on. But usually I end up opening it by actually selecting something and saying inspect element, because then it opens me up to exactly where I want to be. Cool. If I'm sitting on this page and I just say F12, it starts out with everything closed down. And so you basically have to go, okay, well, there's the body, and okay, that's the footer div. Good thing I got some comments in here. So here's the main content, and you really end up getting lost down in here. Now you can see some things happening in the background there. Anytime I hover over something here, as you can see, so this is the form, and as I get narrowed down, you'll see different things in the background highlighting. So this is the paragraph, so I'm getting closer to something, and as I drill in, I can get to something. When it's just so much easier if I'm trying to figure out what the name of this thing is, because these are bound in MVC. So MVC gives them weird IDs. That's the name of the ID. It's based on the action and the value for that action, the parameter. It also gives it names, which are named totally different with dots instead of underscores. And a lot of times with JavaScript, you're counting on those names or IDs to run your selectors. So it really helps to be able to figure out really quickly what you're trying to do there. So one of the things you can do in Chrome to try and figure out what's going on is when you select and inspect an element, and you're trying to figure out why a font is doing a certain thing. So over here we see register PM. So this is running on this style sheet. I assume everybody understands how style sheets work. Cascading style sheets, whatever is closest to the element that's displaying in the DOM is going to take that attribute, as long as the path is the same. You can, a few layers up, mark something, say font, with at the end here, you can say, I need to edit this one, not that one. You can say exclamation point, important. And what that'll, oh, that's what I did pick up, I spelled it wrong. But you could say important, and what that'll do is that'll say, even if something tries to override this register P font, it's still going to stick to that one. It's not a very good thing to do, but sometimes you just have to do it because it's only on a certain thing that you needed to do that. If the path leading up to this is different, it won't override it. But you can turn things off and try and figure out, so now we just moved over, we turn it back on, moves back. So unlike code development, CSS is less like a science as long as you know the rules and more like an art. You end up in here, you could spend a lot of time in here turning things on, turning things off, figuring out if it's best to put it on the P or a surrounding div, if this was surrounded in a div, to get things to look right, not only for this moment, but for all the browsers and all the other pages that these styles may be affecting. You just really mess around with it. You can write, you can make things change right here. Similar to like I showed 2 weeks ago in Visual Studio, how you can drop into debug mode and actually start writing code and see how things turn out. You can do that here too. If we wanted to make the color, and you get IntelliSense, just like you do. So whatever I had highlighted there, it just turned red. Oh, that's probably going to turn everything red. Yeah, so everything is red now. So again, just like in Visual Studio, this is a really good place, especially with style sheets, to just start messing around, get the page to look like the way you want, and then you can just copy this out, the selector out. You can actually select different things. If you mark something off like this and you go ahead and copy this whole thing, it'll actually show it and paste it in your style sheet. It'll paste it in there as it commented out. Some of the other things in the Chrome browser. So another thing that's very hard to do, I'll get to, let's go ahead. So we went to elements. I'll come back to console because it kind of leads in from the sources. This is the best way for Chrome and Firefox to figure out what is going on in JavaScript. Back in the day, we always did alerts, and you would type in a word. I always used the word Bob for some reason. And you would just keep moving it down your JavaScript until it stopped showing up. And then you knew, okay, somewhere above that I broke something, or it's taking a different path, or something's going on. And then usually once or twice a year I get a call from a client asking me who Bob was because I forgot to pull out an alert when I was trying to figure out something. But just like in Visual Studio, you can set up a debugger, a breakpoint. So when this page loads, if that's the spot it's going to hit, so now we have hit. See, this is turned, so I can either F8 or Control / or just click it to go ahead and continue rendering the page. If we look at the page itself, we can see it's paused in the debugger. So the page is waiting for me to figure out what is going on here. Now, cool thing with any items that execute, for instance, okay, well, I'm going to stop this here. I'm going to go ahead and let this play, reload it. That's not what I want to stop. I want to stop it here. Okay, so radio's, I don't know, radio's a natural variable, okay? As you can see out here, nothing going on. I'm just assigning it to here. If I F10 through it, so I can see here, if I mouse over, it's undefined. That's basically null. Actually, you can jump, I won't go into that right now. So now that that's gone, that I've gone by it, this out here wasn't here a second ago. That's why I scrolled to the right and back to the left. These will show up as soon as you F10 over them. Okay, it'll tell you what the value is there. You can also mouse over it. Oops. And it will tell you what that variable is, what the value is. And the other thing you can do, if you wanted to, in the console here, console in Chrome is just like the immediate window in Visual Studio. Now, if something is a function and actually has to be executed, I'll go back up to that. So I have something that can be executed here. I had it. If you have something, okay, so this if statement. This won't give me anything by hovering over it, but by pasting it into, I can go ahead and get my evaluation of what that would return. Or if you're trying to figure out what the value is of a certain value. The other thing that we have in Chrome is events. Now, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about that. That's jQuery. We'll get to that. So we have console. Elements is what we do to look through the page itself, the HTML. Sources is how we get to style sheets, JavaScript files, run our debugging in there. Console, I keep mine open down here, but this is also just a giant version of the console. Network. This is usually helpful for figuring out, what I usually use it for is figuring out if I've missed something, if I've included a JavaScript in it or a CSS and it's not showing up, or an image. Or refresh this so we can get an accurate timeline. So this shows you how long pages are taking, or elements within the page are taking to download. And it'll also, it's a little hard to do this in this resolution. Covering a bunch of stuff. So down here you can see what's actually being pulled. All these long polling, this is, I can play that. Sorry about that. That's Visual Studio.
Yeah, Visual Studio 15
really
is very chatty. What it's doing is it has its own debugging tools to do performance. If you try to like run something through Fiddler with the Visual Studio, you actually have to go in and shut down some of the debugging stuff, which might be what you're seeing. I found that the first time I did stuff.
So if this doesn't download, you'll see the status, you'll see a 404. If sometimes something's just not working and you can't figure out why, it's just because you forgot to either include it, and you'll see that your JavaScript isn't being included, or it's not found, or whatever. Other times, when you're actually trying to load a page dynamically, you won't get the error back. So we actually have on this page, so notice we have country and we have city. We don't have a state in here. I'm going to clear this out. So as soon as I select this, I actually hit the server, grab a partial, and I'm making a request here to bring this down. If I look over here, we can see that actually happened. If there was an error there, it's not obvious on that page that something bad just happened. So by going back here, we can say open in a link in new tab. What that'll do is if there was an error, which there is, it would show me what had actually happened on the back end there. It's also a good way to get what ID I passed, find out some information about the URL that I thought I was getting. Other than that, I don't spend a lot of time in here. I might check it every once in a while just to make sure that I don't have a page that's taking it's a big page or a very slow page. It'll show you the timeline and how long it's taking to come down. It's really hard to understand it in this really condensed resolution, but you can kind of get an idea that these are taking, green, blue. It's hard to understand it in this resolution. You can select to just see what your JavaScript files are doing. So that'll just show, these are filters basically, your images, fonts, so you can get rid of all, some extra junk out of there to see what's going on and how long these are taking to download. Timeline, this one's more fun and interesting. It's almost never do you actually do much with it unless you're trying to report on why something is taking so long. Or if you're trying to give marketing or somebody information, they're trying to say, we're getting feedback from the public that the site's too slow or certain pages are too slow, or this is more for trying to document or trying to figure out some really specific problems that you're having. It's not something that you would be in here mainly for just regular development. It gets really, really detailed, and it's not really for development, so I won't go into it very much for this meeting. But if you really need to know some really deep stats, this is the timeline is where you're going to get it from. All these other things really not going to don't affect development in any way. I would recommend kind of looking into them, just kind of familiar with what they do. And then the tabs we covered are the main ones. When you first start working with them, they'll be a little bit uncomfortable, but it won't be long if you're doing responsive development or heavy UI changes, especially if you're working with the DOM a lot, making stuff show and hide depending on what the user's doing. The better you get with your developer tools in the browser, you're going to be able to have a lot more fun at what you're doing. Bob is going to go ahead and do Internet Explorer, and then depending on how much time we have, we'll start to get into Bootstrap and jQuery and finish those up at the next meeting in 2 weeks.
All right, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to remote into my machine. I want to show you a few things about, let's see, where's remote? Top. You lost it?
Very top.
Okay, all right. I was going to type it out. All right. And am I not in the list this time?
No, you might not be anymore.
Okay, let's see, what is PC, and then did I got it right?
You might need some initials.
Might be Vogelbar instead.
All right, let's try that. That makes sense.
Hey, recognized you.
All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show, yes, we have a variety of tools to use, okay? This is just a different tool. Now for my example, what I'm doing is I'm building, it's an ancillary study database application. This is using Angular and basically front to back Microsoft Stack. This is the Angular code. And what I like to do is I like to actually debug the Angular code, which is pretty much, JavaScript, jQuery, anything like that. I like to debug it in Visual Studio because I'm familiar with those tools. So to do so, first off, when I run it, under your Start menu, if you see Browse With, I'm browsing with Internet Explorer. So you set up your Microsoft solution to browse with Internet Explorer, and then to go into the JavaScript files, what I do is simply type debugger. Now I've added that a few places so we'll be able to step through various parts of this code. And I'm going to take you through the code so we can actually see what it does. Now when I run this app, it's actually going to take us into the main page, and this is the main page controller. So we're going to step through the main page controller just to get a feel for how you can relatively easy debug Angular code or JavaScript code or jQuery code using Visual Studio tools. All right, cross your fingers, wait patiently. Okay, is this because we're remoting?
I don't know, it really threw me off. The rest
Yeah.
of everything.
Okay, don't even ask, that is a release bug with the latest version. All right, but you see right here, now we are in. So again, why I like doing this is the same now as pretty much C# or anything else. I just F10, F10. Okay, I'm going the whole way through. Now I've hit my int function, so I simply, again, step into it, F11, and that takes me into here, F10. Now I've added another debugger in this function, so when I hit F10, it drops me in. This here, we're actually going to make an asynchronous data call, going to go out through the two web services and bring back data from SQL Server. What's neat about it is, here's the asynchronous call. So what I've done is I actually had to drop another debugger in here so that we actually get back to it. So if I hit F5, it's going to take me into the actual data service. So I'm in the data service now. And again, this is basically Angular's version of an AJAX call. I mean, we're doing an HTTP GET, and you see down here we have the success function. So if I hit F10, we're actually going to step over all that. I'm going to go ahead and now hit F5, which drops us into the debugger. At this point, you can see we got something back from the data. All right. When I hit F5 again, that's taking me back into here. And our response, we have something there. So I could actually go and hover over everything and see I got back 5 objects, this classification, and here's a group of study lists associated with it. That gets a little hard to read, so give me a sec. I want to show you a few other things. I'm just stepping through. This is a for each loop, and it's actually going to step over the whole thing. Now if I go up to debug like you normally would under Windows and pop open local, you'll see here is my response. So I can easily go in here and drill down into, for the first group of classification of B cells, I have, it looks like 11 studies, 12 studies, and here's actually the first study that I can see the details of that. So I have the complete capabilities in IE that, or, debugging JavaScript, that everything in Visual Studio. Also, for example, we can go into scope. I can look at the root scope, scroll down, and you see, well, here's my class list, which I just built out, which is effectively nothing more than a drop down. Okay. So then I'm going to hit F5 again. That should actually get me out to the browser. And this is the actual page. So I like to use, that was debugging using IE, and I like to do it that way because it allows me to go into Visual Studio. Now, once you get into IE, I think you have several options. I think there's probably something up here under Tools, and then there's F12 Developer Tools. I always just hit F12. All right, so I was afraid, are we going to cooperate now? No, we're not. Okay, so there I was able to split it. But basically, this is a DOM Explorer here. All right, so what I can do, I click on the DOM Explorer. If I want to see a particular item or element, I come over here, you see how it's highlighted. I click on that. It takes me right over in here, and I see, okay, well that's, it's a div with a well main page search tag added to it. I can navigate down within it. Again, I go over here, and you can see in the main page search, we set a min height of 60, which overloaded the main height there. If I do this, you can see over here how it shrank down. It gives you the same, similar capabilities to what you have in the other tools. What I like here also is you have a console. So something's wrong with the page. If there was a JavaScript error, it basically displays it for you here. Back in the DOM Explorer, so you can play around with that a little bit, but what I really liked is, again, I'll go back into my code. Let's get rid of this guy. I'm in the page. I make a change here. I'm going to fire off an event. So when I fire that event, I am back over stepping through my code. And now I can, again, here I am. It fired off that event. And I basically F10, F5 through everything. Check it out. Come back. Just, it's, nothing fancy or nothing flashy, but I do like the fact that I have all the tools that I'm used to in Visual Studio to really take a look at my data. So,
Are you familiar with some of the other tabs in IE?
we can take a look at them, but short answer, not so much.
Yeah, like I said, in development, you tend to not go there. You obviously not used to the debugger because you do that.
Yeah, I mean, there would, if you wanted to set up a different debugger, you could do it here. Looks like they have a UI, UI responsiveness. To be perfectly honest,
That'd be interesting to look at sometime.
yeah, I mean, it's not what I expected. I expected something like what they have in Chrome where you can see it different ways. I imagine that's in here too somewhere. Profiling, actually. Oh, here, I can look at it like it's in an Edge or something. Okay, wow. Looks like I reloaded it. Okay, I do more front to back, so I don't do as much in the front end, so there are stuff, there's a lot of tools out here. I mean, if you want to explore them, check them out. But like I say, the big thing, cool. There you go, there's a console, some type of unspecified error, so not sure what happened.
Like that.
But like I say, that's just a real quick another approach to go ahead and view through that. So, I mean,
Why
I
would
know
one choose one of these tools over the other?
What's that?
Why would one choose one of these tools over the other?
I'd say pretty much personal preference. I mean, I know you can do everything I just showed you in Chrome.
Yeah.
To step through the code like I showed you in Chrome, there is a way to do it. You have to, well, actually, you gave a demo of how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do the same thing in Chrome. It's just, I've always just thrown debugger in and did it that way. It's really pretty much personal preference. All right.
Yeah, the functionality from what Bob just showed me looks very sim. It looks like they both do the same things, just in a different visual way of doing it.
You have to type debugger, okay, you put a breakpoint. I mean, I know we've been typing debugger for a long time, but
Every time
by now, they'd be able to put a
like we were talking earlier, I'm gonna start out with what you would think. And anytime I say you would think, it usually means it doesn't happen.
I did notice one of the tabs in IE, in the IE F12 developer tool window, One of the tabs was debugger, which would probably be very similar to the Chrome version of the debugger, where you would just set a breakpoint, reload page, and it would hit and walk through.
I have used it before without debugger, but as you said, sometimes it, yeah.
Yeah,
Did
So we
you
gotta stop
try?
on it with debugger.
Did you try in Visual Studio how it jumps back to Visual Studio when you go into debug? Did you try dragging up to? see
yeah,
if that-
and within Visual Studio, you can drag your, basically wherever you are, you can drag that little yellow arrow around to different areas.
So the run the cursor, run
Yeah.
the statement, all that.
I
Or
didn't
next
try,
statement
I
and
didn't
all
try
that.
run the cursor, but I know you can drag it over different.
If you could do the drag, probably everything else you do probably runs pretty much.
I mean, the big thing I like is the fact that I can expand it out real easy and see everything that's in my collection.
Yeah, with the levels.
And that gives me the names and stuff, because when you have a collection nested 3 layers deep, I never remember the names.
You know, and that's a really good point that Bob brings up. You do in Chrome, and I'm sure if you use the debugger tab in IE Developer Tool, you tend to use the commit console, which is like the immediate window, a lot, trying to figure out what's going on and stuff that has to be executed in order for you to see the value of it. Statements, basically.
The way I was doing it, you can also throw in the immediate window if you want to. Within Visual Studio, you have that capabilities.
Same, yeah, so it almost seems like, you know, when I'm doing stuff like you're doing, kind of a spot type, you know, heavy angular and stuff like that, I tend to run Studio in, not, you know, in release mode, because I really don't care about what else is going on. I'm getting everything through a RESTful interface
I think-
anyway.
There might be like 1 or 2 minor advantages, one way or the other, but 95% is personal preference.
Yeah.
You know, so whichever one you want to use, whichever one you're most comfortable with, I just wanted to show IE because I knew it better than you.
One of the things I really liked what you pointed out was if it runs in Chrome, it'll run in Firefox, Opera, Safari. You almost never have a problem. If it runs in IE, it doesn't mean it runs in IE. It means it runs in that version of IE that you have you look at, and you being able to select the difference between Edge, which is more current, versus 10, 9, 8, 7, you know, on your way back. Being able to switch those out really quickly and run your code, that would be a huge advantage, I think, time saver there.
I have a question. What's the best way to debug something when the page isn't loading? So you have a network issue, just go to that network tab, look for an error. Because a lot of times I remember in the past where you see the error, but it was really difficult to drill in further across the network. I mean, I guess you have to use a tool like Fiddler or something, or?
Yeah, for like one of the things I showed, if you're just not getting something back, you need to know, am I getting a 404 or something blowing up? Like, what is the server telling me here? Going into the network or the resources tab will show you that kind of information. I'll also show you if something's just taking a long time to come back to you or whatever. But most of the stuff we do in the front, I'm not sure how your projects are set up, but I've actually messed this up a few times. Working in the front end, you tend to not be able to get to code that's on the other side of the fence, you know, on the other side of the API, the RESTful interface. I've forgotten a few times that, you know, I've sent Brandon an email saying, you know, 10 o'clock at night, like, hey, you're blowing up on me again. Forgetting that all I have to do is go on his side of the fence, set a breakpoint, and then I could just continue on figuring out what's going wrong
See,
here.
that's, I'm doing front to back, so I'm doing that all the time. I go into the jQuery or the Angular code type debugger, and I just go through the rest of the project and throw regular breakpoints and trace it right through.
But in a typical setup, you may only have the front end code on your machine to debug. So you've got to rely on those network services to tell you, hopefully the server's giving you back something you can work with. Because other than that, it's the API team that's got to take care of it.
As far as I remember, in IE Developer Tool, there's a network tab also. I mean, you can get like what's the error or something.
Yeah, I just have to trace it down, yeah. Sometimes you hit that end, I agree, then you just have to go debug the back end or service.
Yeah. Yeah, if the server's not giving you any information, which it shouldn't be, because that's a security issue, yeah, you're kind of stuck. You wanted to go to 1:45 or 3 o'clock?
I think someone else is in here afterwards, but
Want to go to 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
nobody else does.
Yeah, because I could easily fill up 15 minutes on why we go use and what we could probably get started on Twitter Bootstrap, and then that'll lead us nicely into next week. jQuery, which could be fairly extensive depending on how good people are with JavaScript. And because JavaScript is like 5 hours easy just to get started. JavaScript's one of my favorite courses to teach, but you got to start out slow and move slow through it. It can get very complicated very fast and confusing. I'm trying to use this resolution. So let's move over to Bootstrap. URL for Bootstrap is getbootstrap.com. The irony of this website is that it's not very easy to use. For as powerful as Bootstrap is, and it is the industry standard, and it has been for a while. I'm interested to see what gets broken when 4 comes out, because they didn't care when it went from 2 to 3. They redid everything, but sometimes you have to. For instance, like when you're in, say you have this long thing over here, other than hitting Control Home, there's no easy way to get back to the top. Like the navigation on the site is surprisingly horrible, but once you get used to getting around in it, it does pretty well. So they do have a pretty good tutorial about getting started, downloading Bootstrap, how to install it. You spend, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes on Bootstrap, getbootstrap.com, and you've got a good idea how to get it at least running on your application, on your web server. Is anybody familiar with the difference between Sass and LAS? Or less, not LAS, I always do that. Sass. So Sass and LESS are what we call precompilers. What they do is it's a little bit similar to TypeScript with JavaScript, in that when you look at style sheets, they tend to be really long, really repetitive. We have some cool tools like Web Essentials to rip out all the duplication we've done, because we just want to make a change and we forgot what we called it, so we just write it again somewhere else. CSS files tend to be horribly nasty, really hard to maintain. And so tools like Sass and LESS, what they do is, if you set a color, this color purple we got up here, that's a specific hexadecimal color. Matter of fact, if I go like this, that color is exactly a 694F93. So if I use that color in any browser, it's going to look exactly like that. Unfortunately, in the style sheet, it may be in there 10, 20, 30 times in the style sheet. With precompilers, their most powerful ability is to be able to set those as kind of like variables or properties at the top. So you can set it once, and it knows how. So it doesn't send the Sass or LESS code itself down. It recompiles it into real CSS. That's what ends up going down to the browser, displaying on the browser. But you don't have to change the color. You don't have to do a search and find it, change it in 20, 50, 60 different places. So that's basically what it says. That is not Bootstrap's technology. They are just using it. What Bootstrap, in my opinion, is best at is the grid system. And once you get good with the grid system, you can build really cool, responsive websites. Now, why would we worry about responsive websites when we've got stuff like, iOS for building mobile apps right for the iPhone, or, building applications for Android phones, or for the 5 Windows phones that are out there, building them for those, or building. Why would you want to pick a native, what they call native application, which is very expensive to build? You usually have to have 2 different teams, one for iOS and one for Android. Getting them into the app stores, especially with iPhone, is incredibly hard. Versus just building a website that you can hit with a phone and it looks good on your phone. You can hit it with your PC, much cheaper to build. And the answer is, it depends on what you need your application to do. It's getting better and better every year, and speeding up probably better and better every 6 months now. They're coming out with JavaScript libraries now that have more and more control over the hardware on your phone. Camera, vibrations, alerts. You can do alerts with a website, but if they're not on your web page, you're not going to get an alert on your phone. So when you get to those types of scenarios, yeah, you're going to have to go mobile, or native, I mean, for your mobile devices. But most applications, the applications we're building here, there's no need to build at this point for any of the requirements we have, and probably for Bob's too, since he's invested in Angular. There's no need to go the expensive, really expensive route of mobile development. So that means it's got to look good and be functional and comfortable on a touchscreen device, which brings into a whole different realm of most people use what makes sense, what we're used to making sense with mouse and hovers and making things come out. Totally doesn't make sense with a touchscreen device. It's nice, small little links to click on. Doesn't work very well with a thumb, especially putting stuff close together. So having a totally different look and feel is totally possible. Still keeping the theme of your site, but totally different functionality and interface depending on what resolution you're working with, what device you're working with. And the grid system is at the base core foundation of all of that. We used to, like I mentioned, we used to use tables and table rows and table devs, which were totally unresponsive. With the grid system, probably within half an hour, you can get really good. It's really with this grid system.
From where he has started, everybody should go in and code this, just to go ahead and try it. If you haven't done it, because it is really cool what all you can do with these grids, and that's the code you're showing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've tried it. It's really cool. You'll learn a lot.
Yep. So basically, the code looks like this, the format's like that. Okay. So as you're moving stuff in, you can set up in your media queries. Typically, you have 3 different resolutions. Nowadays, I've seen them where they go 4 or 5. But the easiest way to find out is start pulling the side of the browser in, and you'll suddenly see a transition. And then you'll see stuff kind of stack a little bit, but then you'll see another major transition once you get down to the phone size, where they're actually removing elements from the DOM because they're taking up too much space. And because of what you're doing, they don't make sense anymore. Like a full menu doesn't make sense anymore. You get the little, what they call a hamburger. It's the 3 bars or 4 bars stacked on each other. You touch that and it'll either slide out to the side or down. And even that is different depending on what device you're shooting for. You can specify, I think Android tends, one comes down from the top where iPhone tends to come from the left, or vice versa, or something like that. So you can actually make with this system, you can actually, and media queries, which I'll show you next week probably, you can make it work. The user really wouldn't know if they were using a mobile, other than the fact they didn't have to download it from an app store. But it would look and feel like an iPhone's supposed to look and feel, or an Android. But again, they pretty much cover everything. Buttons, how to add buttons. Okay, they have different, see all these mouse overs, all this stuff like this. This is handled natively. This used to be stuff that we had to hand code all ourselves, all the time. Really it took up a lot of time. And just by introducing, something as quick and easy as Bootstrap, you can come up with a really good-looking, really professional-looking site really quickly. And it has just even gives you tutorials on how to use Less and Sass. Setting things to disabled. It's just a matter of learning your basic keywords. Stuff like this. This little thing here, it looks like an image. It's not. If I was to click on that, normally you would see a save image as. It's not. These right here are called glyph cons or font awesomes. They're basically, God, trying to scroll up. So under the Components tab, what comes with Bootstrap is what we call glyph cons, or glyph icons. I've heard it pronounced both ways. But basically, These aren't images, they're text, they're fonts, just like this up here. You know, the available glyphs, all this text up here, this is text, and these are text. They're not images. And the cool thing about them is you can treat them like text, because they are. So you can say that star, you can say GlyphCon star, font size 50, and that star will be huge. You can set the color. You can do anything you can do with a font, you can do with that star just by specifying in the styles. They've got a pretty good selection. Font Awesome has a much bigger selection, and it's actually what we're using here. So all these cool, this is what's called like a tile or a Metro interface. They don't call it Metro anymore. But these aren't images. These are Font Awesome fonts. We actually started though with these here. They just didn't have enough selection for me to find the ones that I really wanted. But they really add some, they help the brain focus on, if you put an envelope, your brain picks up on it that it's email faster than reading the word email. They have, and then they have all kinds of really cool stuff. I recommend you go through the site and just play with it. They got the Jumbotron. They've got badges, which are these little things here that just add style and class to your site, make it look really nice. They do pagination, breadcrumbs. They just make building a website, all the little stuff that used to take up so much time is just there now. One of the things I really, really like that they did, I'm running out of time, so I'm rushing through this a little bit. We'll pick this up again in 2 weeks, and then we'll move into jQuery. But the customize, okay, one, they have themes. So by downloading a theme, you can get a whole bunch of stuff free, basically. But one of the things I really liked was customize. So what that means is, if I know I'm never going to use the progress bar or the Jumbotron or the paging, breakup, if I'm only going to use a couple of things, the GlyphCons, you just check what you want, what you don't want, and then you go ahead and you know, at the bottom of the page, you can set this up to do everything, all the colors, all the font size, the standard font size throughout the site, do pretty much everything you want, and then generate it, and it will give you the downloads that you just use those instead of the generic Bootstrap. You set all your colors, your themes, everything, and then that just becomes, you literally refresh your page and magically everything is what you wanted, if you're good. Like, they could do that. I would mess it up bad. So that's basically a quick intro overview of Bootstrap, and we'll cover a little bit more of it in 2 weeks, and then we'll dive more into jQuery, which means we don't have to write the same JavaScript in different flavors over and over again. jQuery is actually a query language. It queries the DOM, the selectors, and it integrates with Bootstrap. It was almost like they were made for each other, which I think nowadays they are, but they weren't originally. So with that, it's about 3 o'clock. Does anybody have any questions, or real quick, I see people starting to line up out there.
One quick one, for the glyph icons,
Mhm.
can you comment those the way you can comment images so that they can be read out by a screen reader for the blind?
Yeah, you can set that to, what do they call that? No, there's a word for it, but
Okay, they can,
yeah, because they're fonts, you can. So, in fact, I think that's why they're named the way they are.
okay.
If everybody could fill out their feedback sheets we handed out this time, that'd be great. Then we can make sure these are as useful as they can be for everyone. And I guess just drop them by my office and we're getting kicked out.
Do you want me to hit stop here? You want to handle it?
Oh, yeah, you can stop.